It didn't start with silence. Nah. It started with a song in July. Hai Kong Hai Lum. One single video popped up from a sterile hospital room. Donny Osmond lying on a surgical bed, body wrapped in white sheets, eyes half closed. But his voice? Still steady. Still warm. Still familiar. He sang, "I'll make a man out of you," from Mulan, smiling faintly while nurses laughed behind their masks. "When did you start singing?" a doctor asked. "Oh," Donny whispered, "I never stopped." That moment, short as it was, ripped through the internet like an echo from another time, when America still danced to his teenage grin. When the Osmond brothers owned every stage from Vegas to London. When innocence had a melody, and it wore his name. For millions, that clip felt like a goodbye dressed up as courage. The headline spreading online, "Donny Osmond is saying goodbye after tragic diagnosis," had that tabloid flavor, the kind of heartbreak they love to sell. But underneath all that noise, something way more human. A man who'd spent over 6 decades giving the world his voice, now using it to remind everybody he was still here. Donny was 67. The kind of age where legends start becoming headlines for all the wrong reasons. The boy who once made teenage girls faint with just a wink was now a grandfather facing surgery with a song. And if you really knew his story, the pain, the breakdowns, those quiet nights after the spotlight dimmed, this hospital video wasn't tragedy. It was proof. His rise had been so bright it blinded even Chaim. The Osmonds were America's clean-cut miracle in the 70s. 6 brothers and 1 sister raised on faith, discipline, and pure showmanship. Donny, the 5th child, was barely 5 when he stepped on stage beside his brothers on the Andy Williams Show. By his teens, he'd already lived dreams most people never even touch. Record deals, screaming fans, platinum albums. But fame that hits you that young, it leaves a nasty aftertaste. When the hysteria cooled off, when the charts forgot his name, Donny had to figure out how to live without applause. There were years of silence. Depression so heavy he once called it a gray fog that wouldn't lift. He talked openly about panic attacks, about anxiety, so crushing it turned every performance into a battlefield. Still, he fought back. Broadway, Joseph, and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Dancing with the Stars. He rebuilt himself brick by brick, note by note, until that smile wasn't just for show anymore. So when he lay there singing in that hospital bed, it wasn't irony. It was identity. The body might stumble, sure, but the song? The song stays. That tragic diagnosis headline trailing him this summer may have blown things out of proportion. What looked dramatic was really just life catching up. Aging is its own kind of heartbreak when your legacy was built on youth. But Donny faced it the same way he faced every crowd, with grace, humor, and a little grit. "I'm not done yet," he told a fan last year. "There's still music left in me." In a world obsessed with endings, Donny's quiet defiance became the real story. Maybe he wasn't saying goodbye to his fans. Maybe he was saying goodbye to the fear that once owned Chaim. Maybe this wasn't a farewell tour of life, but the intro to peace. As the camera faded from that hospital room, his voice lingered, soft, steady, unbroken. The boy who never stopped singing was still fighting. Not death. Not really. He was fighting being forgotten. Fame isn't gentle. It lifts you up like sunlight, then burns you if you get too close. For Donny Osmond, that lesson came early, long before he understood what it meant to be loved by millions yet truly known by no one. The Osmonds were the American dream in Technicolor. 7 kids turned into proof that discipline and purity could still conquer rock and roll. But behind those perfect harmonies and polished smiles, exhaustion was creeping in. By the time Donny turned 20, he wasn't a boy wonder anymore. He was a man with no identity outside a screaming crowd. The very image that made him a star, clean, polite, wholesomely unshakable, became his cage. "They wouldn't let me grow up," he later admitted. "I was still that innocent kid in a purple jumpsuit." Every attempt to reinvent himself, rock albums, edgier looks, even small sparks of rebellion, got crushed under the weight of that perfect smile he could never take off. The 80s weren't kind. Pop shifted to synthesizers and scandal. The Osmond brand drifted into nostalgia. Record execs stopped calling. Radio went quiet. Concert venues shrank. The same audiences that once worshipped Chaim now treated him like yesterday's news. And yeah, that stung. After shows, he'd sit alone staring into the mirror, wondering who he was once the makeup came off. The reflection wasn't the teen idol anymore. It was a man haunted by applause that had faded. Then came the panic. Real, paralyzing panic. Backstage, his hands would shake so hard he could barely grip the mic. Breathing felt like a battle. Crowds that used to feel like home turned into storms. At the worst of it, he couldn't step on stage without feeling like he might die. Doctors called it anxiety. He called it the fog. It followed Chaim everywhere. Into his car, his house, even his sleep. Some nights he thought about quitting for good. Nights when the silence in his dressing room roared louder than any stadium ever had. But Donny Osmond was raised in faith, not surrender. Somewhere between prayer and straight-up stubbornness, he found the strength to rebuild. Therapy. Honest conversations about mental health long before it was trendy. Facing the shadows fame left behind. The hardest thing I ever did wasn't performing, he said. It was forgiving myself for failing to be perfect. Slowly, quietly, the fog thinned. Broadway called again, and he stepped into Joseph in Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. The coat was bright. The songs were joyful. But this time, he wasn't performing just to be loved. He was performing to live. The stage that once felt like a cage became refuge again. Audiences didn't see scars. They saw resurrection. Maybe that's what carried Chaim through another 3 decades. Even as his career steadied. Though, there was a shadow. The truth that time was catching him. That his body couldn't always match the fire of youth. Still, he kept smiling. Kept touring. Kept singing like music itself could hold back age. But that hospital camera this summer showed something raw. It reminded fans that even legends bleed. And yet, in that fragility, there was something beautiful. Donny wasn't untouchable anymore. He was human. And honestly, that was enough. The voice that once carried teenage fantasies now carried gratitude. In the twilight of his journey, even the fall had rhythm. The fog that once imprisoned Chaim had turned into light. Then came the whisper. Another headline. Donny Osmond is saying goodbye after a tragic diagnosis. Sensational. Maybe even cruel. But believable enough to make millions click. Was this the end of the voice that never stopped singing? Donny himself never confirmed anything. No dramatic statement. No public breakdown. Just that hospital video and a caption. Sometimes life throws a curveball, but the music always finds a way back. Not confession. Poetry. In that silence, the world filled in the blanks. Parkinson's, some said. A degenerative nerve condition, others guessed. Half-truths and made-up quotes floated everywhere. But those closest to Chaim, family, longtime fans, noticed something else. He didn't hide. He didn't disappear. He kept performing. Even when his hands trembled a little. Even when the smile took a second longer to land. He faced fear head-on. No apology. No drama. That courage wasn't new. Silence had always been both his enemy and his teacher. Years ago, he fought anxiety that made him fear the very stage he loved. This time, the silence came from outside, from people demanding answers he wasn't ready to give. He chose grace over gossip. You don't owe anyone your pain, he told a young fan backstage last year. You owe them your truth when you're ready. Still, if you looked close, the signs were there. A canceled tour date here. A rescheduled Vegas residency there. Shows getting shorter. Quieter. Every performance carried that unspoken urgency, like each song could be the last one, no cap. But if that reality scared Chaim, he never let it show. When the spotlight hit his face, the years just melted away. The second that first chord struck, he was still Donny, the kid who believed music could outlive pain, no matter what. But backstage, man, there was a kind of exhaustion no camera ever caught. Friends said Chaim seemed reflective, moving slower, but peaceful. He'd started writing again. Journals, letters, little scraps of songs about legacy and faith. He's not scared. One longtime bandmate said he just doesn't want the end to feel like an ending. That's Donny's paradox. A man staring down mortality with the same bright-eyed optimism that made him immortal in pop culture. If the diagnosis was real, and not just tabloid gossip, it was something he carried quietly, with dignity. The Osmonds were raised believing trials were part of God's plan, that humility and pain were forms of worship. To Donny, illness wasn't some tragic plot twist. It was transition. Years ago, in an interview, he said, "We don't control the storm. We just keep singing through the thunder." And maybe that's what this is, not a goodbye, just a softer verse in a much longer song. His voice may be thinner now, but it still glows with that strange mix of strength and fragility that only comes when a man has faced himself completely. When he sings, every word feels like a prayer. The world might be bracing for an announcement, for a name to the illness, for some headline that turns whispers into facts. But maybe Donny understands something the rest of us don't. The real tragedy isn't dying. It's living without purpose. And even now, his purpose is to show the world what grace looks like under fire. Somewhere backstage, in the dim light of a half-empty arena, Donny hums to himself before stepping out. The crowd doesn't know if it's the last time. Maybe he doesn't either. But when the music starts, one thing is solid, no cap. The boy who never stopped singing still won't say goodbye. When the lights fade and the applause dies out, what's left of a man who's been watched his whole life? For Donny Osmond, the answer's always been simple: family and faith. Those two pillars carried him through every blaze of fame and every stretch of silence. And now, with rumors hanging heavy in the air, they're what keep him standing. He married his childhood sweetheart, Debbie Glenn, right in the middle of the storm. He was 20, wildly famous, loved by millions and scared out of his mind. "I didn't want to lose myself to fame," he once said. "So I married the one person who reminded me who I was before the noise." Against all odds, they made it. More than 40 years later, she's still his quiet fortress. The woman who never chased the spotlight but paid the price of loving a man the world wouldn't let rest. Their 5 sons grew up watching their dad juggle 2 worlds: the glowing idol on stage and the gentle, bone-tired man at home who still tucked them in at night. When Donny talks about them, his voice softens in a way it never does under stage lights. He talks about Sunday dinners, piano laughter, teaching his grandkids the harmonies that once filled his parents' living room. "That's the real legacy," he told a journalist. "Not the fame, not the records, the love that outlasts it." Faith has always been the invisible thread. Raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Donny's belief in divine purpose wasn't just doctrine, it was survival. When depression dragged him under, faith gave him air. When anxiety tried to steal his voice, prayer gave him strength. And now, whatever this illness may be, that same faith keeps him singing. He doesn't preach in interviews. He testifies. "You don't thank God for the storm," he once said. "You thank him for standing beside you through it." People who've seen him lately say he's peaceful, almost glowing in his fragility. He still rehearses, still cracks jokes with the crew, still signs autographs for fans whispering, "Thank you for my childhood." But there's a new stillness too, a quiet readiness. Not for an ending, but for surrender. "I'm learning to slow down," he said on a podcast earlier this year. "I used to think slowing down was quitting. Now I think it's grace." In Las Vegas, where neon hides every crack in the facade, his residency feels almost sacred. Fans who remember the 70s stand beside grandkids who found him on TikTok. When he walks out, the ovation isn't just for who he was. It's for who he's become. Between songs, he tells stories, laughing at himself, sometimes swallowing tears. "I've been blessed to live many lives," he said during one show. "But every night here, I just live one more." If this is his final curtain, he's closing it with gratitude, not regret. He's been writing letters, to friends, to family, even to fans, thanking them for remembering him. There's talk of a last album. Not hits, but hymns. Unfinished songs. Pieces of a man still reaching for light. When he's alone, those close to him say he sits by a window, watching the Nevada sunset spill gold across the desert. It's another kind of stage, quiet, endless, honest. In that golden hour, he hums softly to himself. No cameras, no headlines, just a voice and a prayer. For Donny Osmond, goodbye has never been a word. It's a melody, one he's still rewriting, one gentle note at a time. And the smile, always the smile. For over 60 years, it's been his armor, his currency, his disguise. It sold millions of records, lit up television screens, and made Donny Osmond America's golden boy. But behind that grin was a truth he rarely showed. The cost of always being who everyone else needed him to be. Fame, when it hits too early, doesn't just shape you. It eats you alive. Donny's childhood wasn't playgrounds. It was rehearsals, cameras, responsibility. By 12, he wasn't just singing. He was providing. Every mistake counted. Every word carried weight. His parents, loving but strict, taught discipline and humility. The industry taught fear. Fear of fading. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of letting people down. I wasn't allowed to fail, he once admitted. And that's exhausting. That pressure left scars no makeup could hide. Some nights, after the applause died, he'd collapse backstage, shaking, breathless, stuck inside his own racing heart. He called it the loneliness that follows noise. It haunted him through the 1980s when his fame cooled and the phone stopped ringing. There was a stretch when he couldn't sell tickets, couldn't get hired, couldn't walk into a room without whispers. Didn't he used to be somebody? He tried to reinvent himself, rock albums, adult pop, TV hosting, but it felt like yelling into the wind. The boy who once stood for innocence now fought for credibility in a world that had moved on. People didn't want to see me grow up, he said. They wanted me frozen in 1973. Being adored but misunderstood, that was the quiet ache. But Donny wasn't built for bitterness. Instead of drowning in resentment, he found redemption in humility. Smaller gigs, church events, charity concerts, anywhere the music still mattered. Slowly, he found joy again, not in fame, but in connection. It wasn't the roar of the crowd that healed him. It was the silence after the final note. There were regrets too. The tours that stole time from his kids. The emotional walls he built just to survive. You can't be everywhere at once, he admitted. So you end up half present in your own life. But even those regrets became lessons. As his sons grew, he showed up, not as Donny the legend, but as dad. The man who learned applause can wait. Redemption didn't come through a chart-topping comeback. It came with peace. Winning Dancing with the Stars in 2009 gave him one more spin in the spotlight. But this time, he was different. More playful. More open. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just vibing with the rhythm. When he won, he didn't call it victory. He called it closure. It wasn't about proving I could still do it, he smiled. It was about showing myself I was finally free. In recent years, even as his body slowed and rumors swirled, he seemed lighter. No fear, just gratitude. Every stage of my life had a purpose, he said. Fame taught discipline. The fall taught humility. Recovery taught grace. That grace shows up in small ways now. The way he holds a fan's hand a second longer. The way he pauses before answering, careful not to wound. He carries himself like a man who's made peace with every chapter. The smile that once hid pressure now reflects calm. Maybe that's Donny Osmond's real legacy. Not just the teen idol. Not just the Vegas headliner. But the man who survived himself. He walked through panic, failure, fading fame, and came out softer, stronger, more real. If he's saying goodbye, it's not from weakness. It's from completion. The story, like the song, has come full circle. Every generation leaves a soundtrack behind. Elvis had rebellion. Sinatra had romance. Donny Osmond had sincerity. He didn't sing to shock. He sang to remind us joy could still sound pure. In an age drowning in irony and noise, that purity feels almost rebellious. His career is a timeline of resilience written in melody. Few artists survive one decade on top, let alone 6. Fewer do it without scandal, without cynicism, without losing the boy inside the man. From his first appearance on the Andy Williams Show to the final notes of his Las Vegas residency, he stood for something pop culture doesn't always prize anymore. Kindness, decency, craft. He was never the loudest voice in the room, just the steadiest. In an industry that feeds on chaos, his discipline was the real flex. While others crashed out, he endured. He didn't survive by changing who he was. He survived by deepening it. Ask fans what they remember, and you'll hear the same words: warmth, gratitude, light. People talk about how he stayed long after shows ended, shaking hands, thanking them by name. He looked at you like you were the only person in the world, one fan said. That humanity, more than the awards, the records, the glitter, that's what carved his name into millions of hearts. His legacy carries something way deeper than celebrity. It's a public journey through private pain, the real stuff. Donny never hid his mental struggles, not even when it wasn't cool to talk about them. He opened up about anxiety and depression long before show business was ready for that kind of honesty. He stood on stage and told the raw truth. Success doesn't shut up the darkness. Faith doesn't magically cancel fear. And by owning that, by keeping it real, he turned vulnerability into straight-up victory. Countless fans have said that hearing him speak about survival helped them face their own battles. To his peers, he's a symbol of endurance. To younger artists, a blueprint. To his family, a compass. And to his audience, he's living proof that grace can hit louder than fame. His songs, from Puppy Love to Soldier of Love, might sound simple today, but they were built on something deeper, real faith and connection. He never chased trends. Nah, he chased honesty. That's why his music didn't age like fashion, it aged like faith. The tragic diagnosis that headlines whisper about may or may not define his final chapter, but it won't define his whole story. Illness might slow the body, but legacy? Legacy moves different. It breathes in memories. In the lyrics fans still hum decades later. In the kindness passed on through his example. And in that sense, Donny Osmond isn't fading, he's multiplying. Somewhere right now, a grandmother is teaching her granddaughter to sing, "Go away, little girl." Somewhere, a middle-aged fan who once covered her bedroom walls with his posters is spinning his records again, not for nostalgia, but for comfort. And somewhere in the soft Nevada dusk, Donny himself is watching that same sun he's chased his whole life. Smiling, not because it's over, but because it was beautiful. He'll be remembered not for the noise of his fame, but for the silence that followed, for the peace he found after surviving it all. When the final curtain falls, Donny Osmond's name won't belong to gossip columns or tragic headlines. It will belong to what it always has: the music, the faith, and the unbreakable light of a man who never stopped singing. It begins the way it always has, with a single spotlight. The stage is quiet, the air thick with that sacred kind of anticipation only true fans understand. The silence before a memory hits. Then from the darkness, he steps forward. The years rest softly on his face now. Every wrinkle a lyric. Every breath a lifetime memory. The crowd rises, and before he says a word, before the music even begins, the applause crashes like a wave, half celebration, half prayer. Donny Osmond stands there, hands pressed over his heart, eyes wet but steady. The orchestra swells. The first note of Puppy Love drifts into the air, fragile, eternal. He sings it slower now. Not like a boy chasing fame, but like a man looking back through time. Every word feels like a goodbye letter wrapped in melody. Behind him on the stage screen, old clips flicker, black and white footage of a bright-eyed kid with unstoppable energy. The Osmond brothers in matching suits. A young Donny spinning under blinding TV lights, laughing at the wild madness of it all. Past and present blend into one long heartbeat. When the song ends, the crowd doesn't cheer. They cry. And so does he. People ask me if I'm afraid. He finally says, voice shaking. I'm not. Because this, he gestures to the crowd, to the music, to the moment. This is forever. It's not arrogance. It's truth. Donny Osmond's career was never about charts or clout. It was about connection, the kind that doesn't fade when the music stops. If there's tragedy in his story, it's not that he grew old or that his body began to fail him. The real heartbreak is that time moves on, that even legends eventually whisper goodbye. But Donny's version of goodbye? It's different. It's not silence. It's continuation. He's passing his voice on now, to his children, to his fans, to anyone who still believes kindness can echo louder than fame. After the final bow, the stage lights dim around him. He walks off slowly, back turned to the spotlight that once made him. And in that brief second, a hush falls over the room, so complete you can almost hear history exhale. Then, just before disappearing behind the curtain, he does what he's always done. He turns back, and he smiles. That smile is the full circle. The boy who once feared the world's expectations now stands free of them. The man who once sang to be loved now sings just to say thank you. He isn't leaving music behind. He's leaving it inside us. Outside the arena, as night bleeds into dawn, fans linger in the parking lot, still humming, still holding each other, not ready to let go. Somewhere inside, Donny sits quietly with his wife. The noise fades. The adrenaline cools. He reaches for her hand. That was a good one, he says softly. She nods. They always are. Maybe there won't be a big public announcement. No dramatic health reveal. No final press release. Maybe the end will come the way his whole life unfolded, gently, with grace. And when that day comes, when the world wakes up to headlines about the boy who never stopped singing, his voice will already be there. playing on old records, floating through hospital rooms, echoing in the hearts of those who grew up believing in him. Because Donny Osmond's true legacy isn't fame. It's faith. Faith in music. Faith in goodness. Faith that no darkness lasts forever if you keep a song in your heart. So when the curtain finally falls and the lights fade to black, listen closely. Somewhere in that soft eternity between silence and memory, you'll still hear him, singing, smiling, unbroken.